Humans, us, social twitchy creatures, sat around fires, painted cave walls and shared stories. And at some point in history, our ancestors started smearing mud and chalk on rock, scratching out images of bisons and hunters and gods. They didn't paint because it fed them directly. Or maybe it did. Either way, their art was at least inspired by survival. They painted these walls because it completed something, their survival strategies through visualizing dangers, or it completed them. In time, art becomes something that gets people together, strengthens community, makes us ask questions, writes history. Society needs art. On the other hand, art needs society. It can only reach its full potential when experienced by many. Every man becomes an artist when experiencing art, interpreting it to their own artistic values and transferring those values to the piece. So this symbiotic relationship between society and art really has been there since the beginning. In ancient days, art and survival danced together. Stories of hunters, of battles, of spirits were etched into these walls. But today, it's a bit different. Back then, the line was much clearer. You hunted, you gathered, you created around the fire. Today, that line is blurred under work schedules and emails and deadlines. And now here we are, the descendants of the first artists, sitting here and wondering why it feels so hard to create all of a sudden. I mean, our parents built a foundation for us based on their own struggles. But now we look at the whole world every day. With the internet, we are constantly under a flood of information, a flood of everything. They call it the Gen Z quarter-life crisis. It's not. It's an avalanche of options and an exhaustion of choices. When the biggest hurdle to art is actually just living, no wonder we feel trapped. So we look at all these endless possibilities and then back to our lives, and of course we ask the logical question: is this really it? And my art is suffocating under a blanket of guilt because I have the audacity to call myself an artist while feeling so low on energy after a workday that even if I get myself to create, I still feel like it wasn't enough. It wasn't my best. Burnout is sneaky. It's what happens when you're using the same mental muscle for work and hobbies, fooling yourself into thinking it's rest, when really it's just more brain calories being burnt in a different way. It's like trying to relax by reading another technical manual after a day of reading technical manuals. That is an analogy. And if you don't like your job, good luck even imagining a hobby when you get home, brain already fully saturated, thoughts too tired to lift a finger. Here's something I picked up from Pirate Software, a great channel for anything related to game development. They became famous in YouTube Shorts for unknown reasons, but they talk about a lot of tips about self-discipline, for example. So the tip is, try a power nap between your work and your hobby time. And yes, I know there is debate whether short naps are good or bad for you. Personally, I keep them under 45 minutes and it does wonders for me. Also, you can try meditation, but honestly, I'm far away from being an enlightenment master, more of a fall asleep mid-session kind of guy. Now that I think about it, might be the beer. But here is the question we often dodge. Do you actually hate your work, or do you hate the job you're in? Because those are not the same thing, my friends. You might be surprised to find that your issue isn't with work itself. It's just the context, the people, the place. And sometimes a fresh start can make you remember why you loved to work on that thing that you're working with it to begin with. And that spark might just spill over to your creative projects too. It's me. Many of you that clicked on this video probably already have a bunch of hobbies. Most of you probably have more than one. But what if you don't? Maybe some feel like hobbies are optional. I don't think they are. I think they are critical, even if we convince ourselves otherwise with excuses like, I don't have enough free time. I'm just not born with any talent. Oh, I couldn't paint even if my life depended on it. But this idea that talent is somehow some divine blessing is just nonsense. Talent is just practice in disguise. 20 to 30 minutes a day spent on your hobbies really makes a difference, and you will improve at so much greater speed than you ever thought you would. And that first spark of progress, that's a feeling like no other. I think the biggest problem here is motivation, and I want to talk in another video more about my theory why this is, and I call it the dissonance between the curve of satisfaction and the curve of progress or knowledge. So caress the white stone with black runes etched into it in ancient Latin. That spell, join the order of the Barlow keep. I have a confession to make. I have spreadsheets for everything, games played, books read, every social gathering, I track it all, thinking I can somehow bring order to the chaos. And while that obsessive structure sometimes reassures me, see, I did socialize, I spent 3, 4, 5 days this month doing this and that. I did create, I had a video every week. It also exhausts me. I'm thinking I'm chasing stability, but in reality, the only thing that I'm doing is chasing my own tail. D&D, this hobby of ours, tabletop RPGs, narrative role-playing, whatever you want to call it, taught me an important lesson. Life is a sandbox. It's not a railroaded campaign. You can plan, and sure, planning is great until the dice roll and something unexpected changes everything. I used to think that I have to plan everything. To plan my way to fulfillment. But in the game, no matter how much I try, I'm still a player listening to the dice, and no matter how much I plan, the players always find a way to screw it up. So I stopped planning in my games, and now I want to do the same in my life. So here I am, quitting my job. Not because it's bad, not because I think you should do the same. For some of you, that job is your thing. It's your way to provide, to create stability. But for me, I was burning out, working the same muscles, working the same patterns, letting the creativity that once fed me drain me out bit by bit. There's something primal about sitting down with friends, rolling dice, creating stories together. We aren't just people in a room anymore. We are a tribe around the fire. We are the community. We are making up stories of heroes, of heartbreak, of triumph. We bond, we fail, we laugh. And then we come back to our daily lives, feeling like we've lived 1,000 lives in those games for just a few hours a night. We were heroes, we were villains, we were something more. The story unfolds because we let it. And maybe life can be the same. So yes, tabletop RPGs played a huge role in me finding the courage to take this leap. The funny thing is, I used to dread social situations, but somewhere in the middle of running a tabletop for all kinds of people, taking on countless roles as the DM, my social fears started to fade a bit more. Of course, work played a role into it, and maturity also played a huge role in it, but I think I like to believe that tabletop RPGs really played a role there. It's almost like I saw myself from a dozen different angles and realized it was a lot less scary than I'd made it up to be. And yes, I know, it's easy for me to say all this. There are people out there, people with far more responsibilities than I have. But I'm 27. I don't have any strings attached. If I don't try this now, when will I? I'm sharing this video, clickbait title and all, because somewhere out there, somewhere in our hobby, in our audience, maybe broader, there is someone who is going through the similar feelings but doesn't know how to verbalize them. I think there is someone that this video is for, and maybe someone who is gonna say, wow, maybe I also need this. And I want you to ask all of these questions, talk to yourself, figure out what your next move is. Now, honestly, I wonder what I'll create with this whole 6 months of free time. Will it be a campaign to end all campaigns? A passive stream of income? Hell, I don't know. Maybe this channel kicks off. Then there is the ego, the mask, the personal PR campaign that we run for ourselves every day in and day out. I could go deeper on this in another video, but here's a thought for now. How much of that mask, of this self-image, holds us in place, convincing us that we are one static thing, forever chained to one's predictable patterns? Ego tells us, I am this way. This is me. And when we believe that too strongly, we risk getting locked into the identity that feels permanent, and yet it was built on the convenience of comfort. I mean, I've been saying to myself, I'm a software engineer, so I do software engineering things. Like, that's the only thing there is. But beneath the surface, beyond ego's need for control, was a creative part of me struggling to get free. The thing is, that job, it's fine. It's not good enough to make me feel fulfilled, but it's not bad enough that I felt desperate to change it. So I let it sit, let it chip away at me, my ego too scared to shake it up. And I think it's that same fear that makes us hesitant to roleplay at the beginning. You know how when you start roleplaying, there is this shame that you feel, almost like you're cringing a bit? Ego hates anything that threatens the status quo but doesn't predominantly make it more powerful. Ultimately, the most successful egos are not the ones that are shaped by ourselves, but the ones that are created by society. We let the world draft a mold for us, and the rest of the time, we fit ourselves into it. And then there are these big, absurd dreams, the kind we daydream about, maybe even cringe a little for having. Daydreaming is just internal roleplay, really. A quiet escape where we imagine ourselves as being somewhere else or being someone else. So maybe the same part of us that clings to that ego is what keeps us from chasing those dreams too. Role-playing, oddly enough, is one of the best ego dissolvers I've found, and I'm not talking about ego death in a hippie way. I'm talking about dissolving it just a little bit, just to feel how it is to step across the boundaries a bit. I mean, in a game, you get to see the world from other people's perspectives, slip into other minds, maybe other genders. You try out different masks, and as a result of trying out all these masks, you end up averaging them out into something that maybe you like more than what you developed just through societal pressure. It's like every time you have to roleplay, you confront the walls of your own mind, and with that you're learning that you don't have to be just one thing. Dissolving these boundaries, even little by little, is terrifying at first, because like any act of dissolving the ego is bound to create a feeling of discomfort, shame, maybe even fear and panic. Looking at you, bad mushroom trips. So there's the real truth. I'm not quitting because I have it all figured out, but because I'm ready to stop trying to control everything. I want to make space for a story that writes itself, for a world where art and survival can finally sit side by side again. And maybe the journey ahead will be chaotic and unstructured, and I must admit, I am fucking terrified. But maybe, just maybe, it will all be worth it. For those new to the channel, first of all, welcome. Not every video is like this here. This is more like a personal brain dump of a seeking artist and game master. That being said, my goal for this channel is for it to be a thought-provoking take on tabletop RPGs and creative process in general. Yes, I do indie game reviews, I talk about mechanics I find in the wild and find cool, mostly talk about random TTRPG topics that tickle my brain. But the core idea is there. I want every time you watch a Barlow video to be like, huh, and disappear into your thoughts. And big thank you to my Patreon supporters. Your pledge played a big part in showing me that there are people out there that enjoy my stuff. It gave me courage to try out the things that I'm doing now. And for that, I am very thankful. So I want you, from the depths of my heart, to keep rolling dice and keep on dreaming and keep creating. And I want you to remember, This one life that you have is your story to tell. And with that, I bid you farewell, keepers.